cho la da la me me da me an ji on bo da je jin la so cho cho la cha wa cha ba na san je so ba de shi shi de ju de da ji je de me ji ye de ni de je de je yin de je sa wi de ju ba de je che ba da la cho de de ju ku wa de la be ne je san je sun je yin me da an be da ni le ba to ni ye ji le na mo la ye ka da be da ni je ka ru da da me ye ka na ro ba ku je da na che ba tam je ka do da ge che de do 오야다 아니 방금 봐봐도 좋지 세베티 그나라 그래서 미기 레드 남지 대우니 링아 유지 예제 최진이 진의 태도 사면 미세파 대단히 지자지 배번저 전에 어디다 소인 바래 와 시든 그 겨우 되시 삼보라 따야 되나 이 근데 소리에서는 미기 대디 남지 사변이시 미기 왜 레지 제부 아니 동아 계제기 사변 안다 가서는 다 미기 왜 레다 와 미기 레지 미기 레지 남제부니 가서 미기 대디 남지 사변이시 미기 왜 레지 제부 남민지 남문대라 아니 가서 그래 사람 미게 왜래 심목이 냐와 진기 이다 어디를 가나 아니 충옥이 된적이 깨네 아니 도와라랑 그 동안 용고와 연장 미게 대대 남지 사변이세 미게 대대 남 미게 왜래 제부디 제제기 사변이 아니 미게 왜래 다다 최진난 미자스 미게 대대 남지 사변이 링아 예지 리지권의 사와기 미게와 마게권의 사와기 미게와 이지권의 사위 미게와 세가나 미게 대대 남지 사변이 링아 예지 예지 어다 최진이 세자고 쳐라라 편이 아니 진의 태도자면 맞아봐我天在为每个月都解决给三边台他都怎么样？啊，你去做嘛的？今年提出怎样？没些把的台上车上的，啊你别说钱不钱呢，台上你去扎进别把这钱呢，我就说明白的。
So there's a verse from the letter to a friend by Master Nagarjuna, and this work, as we mentioned also previously, is also considered to be addressed to the great king Deche Sangpo and the Indian king Deche Sangpo. And in this verse from the letter to the friend, it says, "O king, all of the results of the actions of non-virtuous actions. It gives rise to all of the different kinds of sufferings that are experienced, particularly in the lower realms. So in the case of the heaviest kinds of non-virtuous actions that one performs, those give rise to this intense sufferings in the hells. And then intermediate intensity sorts of non-virtues that one performs, or actions that are non-virtuous with a sort of intermediate level of weight, give rise to the intermediate sort of sufferings that are experienced by the hungry ghosts or pretas. And then the lighter forms of non-virtuous action also give rise to negative results in the lower realms, such as the sufferings that we see in the case of the animals. So given the fact that these faulty actions that are engaged in non-virtuous kinds of behavior give rise to all of these different kinds of misery and suffering in the lower realms, then with whatever kind of effort that you're able to give rise to, using whatever means possible and all of the effort that you're able to produce, you should direct yourself towards the avoidance of these kinds of non-virtuous actions. And he's addressing this to his friend, the king. and saying that at the end there, the last line is that with whatever kind of means that you have available to you, you should exert yourself to avoid these negative actions because of the suffering results that they give rise to.
Oh yeah, 다 되네 가서 대단히 기자지 배바 저 시간라. 아니 다 가서래 루미게 왜래 채와라 때는 대우 동아 중화다. 대외래 채와라 때는 아니 대우 동아 중화 중화 아 이제 제니. 아니 미게 왜래 채나 아니 대우 동아 중주 요와 예장. 아니 대우 동아 미대나 아니 동아 있죠. 아니 가서 미게와 본데디 제거하래. 대개와 그 제거와 인자 개 가서래 자와 가와 투고래 해서나 아니 랜데래 이식이 타바제와 투고래.
So this all comes down ultimately to one's sort of confidence and trust in the fact of the relationship between karma and its results. In order to have that, you have to understand how it is that if one performs faulty, negative kinds of actions, whether it's with your body, physically or verbally or mentally, if you engage in negative kinds of activity, then that inevitably will give rise to unhappiness, suffering of various sorts, so that there's this unbreakable relationship between the actions we perform verbally, mentally, physically. If they're faulty, they'll inevitably give rise to suffering, unhappiness of various types. And then on the other side of that, if we perform virtuous kinds of actions, again with our bodies or verbally or mentally, virtuous kinds of activities will definitely give rise to happiness. So if a person wishes happiness, for happiness and wishes to avoid suffering, then it's indispensable to develop this kind of sort of confident trust in the relationship between our behavior, our actions, our karma, and the results that arise from those that kind of the behavior that we engage in.
Oh, 진짜 인자 아니 가서래 랜데라 이식이 타바제와라 라레와 인자 아니 단단히 온도 두제라 아니 대바당 내래 두제라 셔럽 샤고야데 다 두샤고야 말해 와 진짜 뒤올라 셔라 온도 두제라 대바당 내래 두제라 셔럽 시가라 대바다 셔럽 이샤고야 두세.
So here, in order to develop that kind of, or explain how that works, developing the kind of confident trust or faith in karma and its results, in the text we're reading here, the precious Garland, it refers to the two things as being the primary prerequisites for the development of that kind of faith. Or I'm sorry, I misspoke here as a translator. That faith is the prerequisite for having the
회장 온도당 엘렌이 열어와. 온도 두제 대라 대바당 내 두제 셔럽 잡고다 군자한테 통할.
So here it's explaining that faith is the prerequisite for engaging in the Dharma as well as developing wisdom in order to have engagement in the Dharma. I'm sorry. Yeah. Right. I got mixed up in the statements.
온도 두발 집에 탑되라.
온도 두발 집에
해바다. 내일 두발 집에 탑되라. 셔럽.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. So here we're talking about how you develop the rebirth or birth in a high state, in high status within the world, and the development of definite or highest good, which is liberation and omniscience. In order to achieve those, one has to have faith in karma, this kind of confident trust or faith in karma and its results, in order to achieve the high status of good rebirth, but then in order to achieve the highest good, which is the achievement of liberation and so forth, one has to have wisdom. So here it's saying that those two are necessary for achieving these two states, but among them actually faith or this kind of confident trust is the prerequisite for them in order to achieve them. Yeah.
Oh, 근데 인자 다 렌데라 이시기 대바 제발라 안에 다 지구 충을 가서 송바 나신 현재 렌데 지리 삼바당 안에 렌데 안 유den도 제다도 샤바 소야디 연구하래 다 제다도 샤바 해야 돼 대면 그 주본 거 주름디 수제 도시 연구하래 난다 렌데 지리 샤바데라 안에 렌에 와당 레 폐체 와당 레 마셰 와당 미셰 바당 샤바 취미세 와 전에 안에 실산바데라 시에 도시체.
So then here, the prerequisite, the beginning of this then is developing the kind of trust or confidence, faith in the relationship between our karma and our actions and their results. And in general, in order to develop this kind of understanding, you have to come to recognize the different points of qualities of karma, that the actions we perform definitely produce results, that when we perform an action, the result can expand, the effect of it will expand or increase in power, that when one performs an action, no one else will experience the result of it. And I missed one, the fourth one? Chumizawa, yeah. And that when one performs an action, there will, it's definitely the case that one will have to experience the result of it. It's not the case that the result of that action will ever be lost or dissipated.
Oh yeah, that lengewa sena kare sena ane du ke migele ane deu de tu juang eba. Du ke wa chewa la tene deu de wa juang tang eba tang. Mige wa chewa la tene deu ane dunga juang eba yin zang ane kaso de deu dunga mede na ane ju mige wa bongge. Deu de wa deu na ane ti ju ke wa du ke wa de ane lengewa la tene tu stammer dang wa eba.
So the first of these points then is that karma is definite. Here, this refers to the definite relationship between the quality of the action, the karma, and the quality of the result. That is, that virtuous actions definitely produce virtuous or happy results or positive results. Non-virtuous actions definitely produce undesirable results, unhappiness and suffering. So developing conviction in the relationship between the types of actions that we engage in and the results of them, that virtue produces happiness, non-virtue produces suffering. That's the first point in developing sort of confident trust or faith in the fact of karma and its results.
Oh yeah. Tene lengewa sambe ane gewa ndukwa tache watang. Diba bongo ya tache. Mikiwe le bongo ya tache watang. Ane gewa ndukwa tache ba.
So then, likewise, once you understand that the actions and their results have that kind of relationship, that there's a sort of a fixed relationship between virtue and happiness, non-virtue and suffering, then you need to
겨 두고 냠도 다 쳐봐다. 미국 펑크.
So, therefore, then once you've understood that, thought about that, and recognized that fact, then you have to form a sort of determination that since one desires happiness, one has to get rid of non-virtuous actions. If you desire happiness, you have to engage in virtue. If you wish to be free from suffering and so forth, then you must definitely give up non-virtue. So you form that sort of strong determination to develop virtue and avoid non-virtue.
Oh yeah, that didn't 내 폐체와 싸매대 가르래서나 아니 치료기기 아니 내지 사변 찍보다고 찍이장 아니 제부 아니 망보 폐와 나신체네 아니 개미게 내 총우지기장 아니 제부 아니 또 첨보 가서 미국 총우 체외장 직된 바로 직전제 풍조 첨보 톱신도 코바송이 독신호 전에 아니 너희 가서 송환하신 전에 미국 위에 총우지 체외장 아니 채치마라 동아지 직직 아니 직바 동아지 직바 첨보 장그레스 배 가르래서나 아니 가서 풍조 첨보 톱 지지 아니 동아 때문에 풍조 첨보 톱을 가르래서나 랑기 두 코발라 두지 송나 아니 두지 세와라 때문에 아니 동아 빠도 매봐 랑 풍조 첨보 통화대 빼라샤네 어제 대송하래 지된每中国前外讲几点八路就简直碰着全部套现都跨不了双位都洗脑来配下
碰着是呢碰着
然后碰了就个这东啊结巴去个这是
Then the next point then is that an action actions that we perform, karma means action, that we perform gives rise to increasing sorts of, or a vast increased sort of result. So even a small action, a small negative or positive action can produce an extremely extensive result. In the sutra, it's explained that some very small sort of karma that we create here in this life can give rise to intense, like if it's a negative action, will produce intense, terrifying suffering in the future life. And the analogy that's given for this is that if you eat a tiny pellet of poison, it can produce a complete horrible disaster within your body, completely ruin your health and kill you ultimately. So just like that, a small action that we do here, if it's a negative action, can sort of expand, increase in terms of its potency, such that it produces a vast suffering in the future life.
Oh yeah, that 대신도 대화 총우지 체외장 아니 대우도 전부 대화 다주나 신체네. 소놈 총우 체외장 지된 바로 대전진. 아니 가서 저기 주는 번편조 몇바 신세 줘를 저 타마트 자마서. 소놈 총우 체외장 지된 바로 전체 다장 톱주지. tension 다자 톱세지 runam 핀조 민바싱 어디게 가르래서 나다 쏘는 충우지 제외장 안에 지된 바로로 대화를 된지 되그래서 빼나 그와 충우지 제화되지 인하양 아니 저와 치만 온디 공방 톱지지 아니 그 충우가 삼바텐지 그 그놈 게 사서나 온도 톱지 그 줄아줘야 타바테니 그 로이 텐드니 요가나 티치도 전환이 타베 줄줘야 사바 장주고 있으면 그냥 란데서는 충무지 제와잖아니 안에 탐제 첨부 그 텐주바 인장 선한 충무 제외자 전체 첨부 탑주대시와 전체 다장 줍주대세요 누남 안에 편조 민바싱 안에 치료 그때도 민바스페셜
So here the same thing applies to virtuous karma, virtuous actions we engage in. Even a small virtuous action that we perform now in this life can produce an incredibly vast positive result in our future life, or in next life, or some future life. Here, if you think about virtuous actions that we engage in, they can be motivated by different kinds of intentions. So if we're thinking, if we do this single action, like a small virtuous action that we engage in, if we do it with the wish that we achieve simply a high status, a good rebirth in the next life, with merely that sort of intention that is the basic intention of the person of small interest or small scope, then it'll produce that kind of result, a great happy life in the next life or some future life. Likewise, if we do this with the same action with the intention, motivation of wishing to achieve liberation, that will eventually give rise to our achievement of the status of an Arya, someone who understands reality, or eventually the status of an Arhat, someone who's achieved nirvana. And then finally, if we do the same action with bodhicitta, the aspiration to become a Buddha, out of love and compassion for others, then that same action eventually will culminate and mature into the ultimate result of the achievement of perfect Buddhahood. So here the sutra gives the example that generally speaking, that even a small virtuous action will expand in terms, or increase in terms of its result, such that it produces a vast result in the future. And the example that's given for that is that you take even like a single seed of certain kinds of plants, crops. If you plant that seed, then it can produce in the future an entire gigantic harvest of the desired grain or other kind of crop that you wish.
Oh yeah, that 되게 내 폐체와 삼배 아니 대화 충우지 현장야 아니 좁지 강도탕 대화 충우지 현장야 아니 뽕 강도 체와대 타지야 말이야.
So then when you understand this property of karma, that its expandability, or ability to, that the result of it can be vast in comparison to the action itself, then you develop this intense determination to do whatever you can to perform even the smallest kind of virtuous action, and to, on the other hand as well, avoid at all costs even the smallest kind of non-virtuous actions.
Oh yeah, then 다 숨바데라 내 마셔봐다 미쳐봐 세지 아니 가서를 싫어 그 균대라야 아니 규정도 마서 와라 아니 대부 미중화 태나신 아니 개회 내기 대부 대화 되고 얘나 아니 개회 내기 대부 아니 가서 개회 죽대 대화 죽고 와당 미개회래 가서래 미개회래지 아니 동아 미대나 동아기 주 미개와 뽕고 와 인상 다개 미개게 내지 대부 소소로 내와 인상 개회 내지 대부라 대화 중화당 미개회 내지 대부라 아니 동아 중화대 어때 중화저 마도 개회래 마사 와라 대화 미중화 어때 이제 가는 대화 되되거나 아니 개회래 내와 싸고와 인상 대화 되바다 동안 미제 바란제서 예바 인상 아니 다 가서래 대화 직부 줘봐 타제바다 미개벨레 타지도 봉아 타제바 도시 있어요.
Then one needs to also consider the determined relationship between karma and its results. That is, if we look at external causality, just generally, we see that causes produce specific kinds of results that in the outer world as well, that specific kinds of actions or specific kinds of causes give rise to their specific sorts of results. It's not the case that causality is random, but rather it has that specificity of it. Similarly, when we apply it to the internal causality of karma and the experience that results that arise out of it, our positive actions are specifically will give rise to happiness, and negative actions, non-virtuous actions, will specifically give rise to suffering. So when we understand that and we develop a kind of clear, fixed determination of this fact, then it will induce us to have a firm resolution that no matter what kind of situation we're in, whatever the circumstances may be, we need to, at all costs, avoid all forms of negative action, non-virtuous action, and likewise do whatever we can and purely devote ourselves to producing engaging in virtuous kinds of activities, virtuous karma.
Oh yeah, that's in the Shiva Chava Chi Misawa said, Annie give me le, and the chair chinjala, give a less chair chinjala, give a le, take it, Namiji Devon, what the white chimba. Then, give a country jambala sowaki, Jim Martana, Annie give a lady, Namiji Devon, what a chimbata. Miki will chair chinjala, Miki will dig any number to see Shapa, Taba Marjana, Miki will take in Jebu, and the Dungan Yabar Chimba. Lujanam Jilanam, Kawaja and Chimisa, Sosin Tula Papa, not do need to remember Churu, Sirigana, later than Tessa and me. And what other shoe and Nashi got any lair take it, Miki will let the country Marjona. Namiji drove, and you go just on a young, Namiji drove Chimba. Or Miki will let you go Layla Yang, Namiji drove, and you go just on a Miki let it Namin drove Chimba, such Lach our Chimisawa, said Toyo Gasso, Lujanam Jelanam, Nikawa Giant Chimisas. And then drove the Jimby, Jay Sobi, Tuesday, and they drove in about to Chimbi, what is somewhere. They is that. Le Chava Chi Misawa Sambe, and you give a lady, give a lady, and you condola so Mijumba Kaki, Mijumba, and it call Mijumbitala Bear. Oh, Miki will lay Chi Misawa Yenzang, Miki will lady, and you put to Shaba Tabachi, you put to Shikone Shabachi la Baye.
So then the final point here of the 4 points is that when we perform an action, we create karma. It is definitely the case that the result of that action, the effect of it, will not be lost. Here, so if we perform virtuous actions, virtuous karma, positive actions, then inevitably, at some point in the future, we will experience happiness as a result of that. And then on the other hand, if we perform non-virtuous actions, if we engage in non-virtuous behavior, it's inevitable that in the future, the result of that will arise. That is, the relationship between the cause here and the effect is such that once we create the cause, the action, the effect of it will definitely arise at some point in the future. There's a qualification on this, however, in that in the case of virtuous actions, the results of them can be negated or destroyed by anger, intense forms, anger and especially. If you've created performed a virtuous action, and but in the interim, before the result arises, you've gotten extremely angry, that can function to stop the positive result of the virtuous action from arising. And then on the other hand, non-virtuous actions as well. If you've performed a non-virtuous action, it's generally the case that the result of that will inevitably arise in the future, but there's a qualification that it's possible to purify that negative oneself of the result of that negative action through engaging in the four opponent powers of confession and so forth. Through means by the force of these four opponent powers, one can prevent the result of the non-virtuous action from arising. But apart from those sort of two, and there are others too, but those two sort of main qualifications, it's inevitable that if you do something virtuous at some point in the future, even if it takes eons, hundreds of thousands of eons, some point in the future you'll experience happiness as a result of that. And then likewise on the non-virtuous side, if you do something that's negative, at some point it may take eons for the result to arise, but some point in the future it will give rise to an experience of suffering.
아니 다 단다데 땡라 아니 안주 땡당 던지 땡이 예배나네 아니 던지 땡데 토바 셔발라 아니 주카레 고아레 사나 다진 자신 전에 주게와 제거와라 때네 아니 대우 대화 중원 고고 현상 아니 던도 아니 원디 땡 토바 셔발라 아니 주카레 고고레 사나 주 아니 미게 접은 거 주는 거야
So here then, once you've understood these four properties of karma, four factors, aspects of actions that we engage in, then you, by understanding them individually and collectively, this will induce you to form a strong determination to avoid non-virtue at all costs and to do whatever is you have within your ability to perform virtuous kinds of actions. That's the way to develop that kind of confident trust or faith in the reality of karma. So then, as far as how we understand karma operating, or the sort of field within which it operates, we need to then turn to the sort of realms within which karma occurs. Once we've developed this determination to avoid non-virtue and to develop virtue, because we want a good kind of life, good happiness, and to avoid suffering, then we need to understand specifically the causality that obtains between the high status types of lives and the actions that give rise to that kind of high status. So this leads us into then the consideration of what high status is and how the avoidance of the 10 kinds of non-virtuous actions is the principal method by which we accomplish high status forms of life.
Oh yeah, that tenderly, I know when the Jundian Song Tella, I need that there in the tree color. Telangondo Devadi never leva tabadu. The Ruban Dorduna, Ane Dona Tada Sherapo, Swana Shin. Telangondo ni Devadi, Sada mi Juji, Dewey Devatang. Danium Jiri Bayila.
So
I meet Juji Dewey Devatang, Ane or Devatang, so Danium Jiri Bayila.
So here, this leads into what we need to do first is identify the causality that exists between the result we wish, which is high life in a high status, good form of life, and the causes that give rise to it, So here, the actual identification of the causality is presented in verse 4, which says, "Here we maintain that high status is happiness, and the highest good is liberation. In brief, the method for attaining them I summarize as faith and wisdom." So the beginning of the discussion here is that high status is identified as happiness or pleasure, pleasurable experience. This is referring to basically to sensations that we experience. Experience is largely sensation. And so here it says that the high status is identified as happiness, and it refers to the happiness, whatever kind of happiness or pleasurable sensations, as well as neutral types of experience or sensation that are included within the life streams of beings that are born as gods and human beings.
Oh yeah. Never lebani, never leba said it, nearly tarpalache. Tarba, Tom, never lebani, Dame to be share of geese, that Dame to be share of the Yambo Chane. Anita, Tap Chabar changes Simbo Gone, Dugum Bambi Chava, Dunga the Kunjum Bambi Chava, de Tarba, Tapa Deson, Ele Tapa Dedo.
Then, as far as the highest good, this is identified or defined as is accepted here as being liberation, and liberation is specifically the separation from, which is a sort of state of separation in which one has entirely gotten rid of the suffering as well as the origin of suffering. And one does this by means of the wisdom that understands selflessness.
Oh, yeah. Then never leba sigo Dunjan Carre Sana Yang Dugum Bamba Bambi Chava Tovnya Yang and a judgment Bamba and Yamba Dunga Chirama Duguari. What tender Mayimba Bamba de La Mitoba La Mitobi Cheji Chava Yimbana and never leba.
So here, this what is called the highest good. It's called that. It's given that name, identification. It's called the highest good because it is a form of separation which has the property of not returning into the samsaric state. So here, this is referring specifically to the form of liberation or a separation from suffering and the origin of suffering, which one finds in the case of arhats, who have achieved this state in which they will never again return into or fall into suffering existence again. And it's given this specification to distinguish it from the types of fallacious or supposed liberation, which is held by non-Buddhist practitioners, that where they've achieved a temporary kind of freedom from coarse forms of suffering, but have not achieved this definitive separation from suffering and the origin, especially the origin of suffering.
Oh yeah, that Jebu Tang. Quando Shabaki had a mean Gigi Dewatang. I Dewatang, Tanum Chiri, Mondotang. Never leba any castle. Any Dugubambi Chava Tarpati, Nivoti, Rubat, and Ted Rubicilla, and a Lord Dina. Ondo Rubicete, Landre. Oh, Anita, Landretang, Tembatang, Gunjola Taba. Oh, only that Casore and never level to Chetella, and it only to be several.
So then, with respect to the that which the agent that actualizes these two sorts of results, here, the first result is as stated, just mentioned, that the happiness and as well as the neutral kinds of sensations or experience that is included within the lives of gods and humans, those positive experiences, those arise from that specifically arises in brief from understanding of karma and its results, and faith, specifically having faith or confidence in the fact of karma and the results of karma, as well as confidence and faith in the truths taught by the Buddha, as well as faith in the three jewels and so forth. So that faith is the agent, or that which accomplishes those sorts of results, happiness in the higher realms, and as well as neutral kinds of experience in the higher realms. And then that which actualizes the highest good is that kind of result, that kind of liberation, which is an irreversible separation from suffering and the origin of suffering, is the wisdom that understands emptiness.
Oh yeah, 아니 가서래 너나 대단 셔라 포 세키기 아니 너도와 대기 아니 제봉 온도당 온도 땡당 내래 타반이기 아니 주대라 아니 타바다 셔라 제 너나 아니 다게 대주바 dur두나 세대라 아니 제부텔라양 내래 타바당 율라니 타바다 셔람니 송야와 나시 제부텔라양 아니 온도당 내래니 송야바데 대샤게 말해 도니도와 대인주반 도르두나 셔와지당 도나 타다 셔라포 세기 오도나 세지다 이유한난 도나 치마 대기 아니 가서래 귤라 타바다 셔람니 송야바 도나 타다 셔람이 포스 여기 아니 대인주반 도르두나 세대기 귤라 타신니 송야바 대부랑 온도당 안 엘레니 송야바데
So, kondaiti, konsumasonti, donati.
Dona siguran dona doticana. De duga. Dona siwe juizo duwa yinla. Dona dotuwangamani tewi changeso. De duga. Dotuwangamani se de karerese tei juba dortuna. Juba 어디 그치 셀라블 대신이 송에 받들라 저불당 온도당 내려니는 와래 그들라 가려 와래 해서나 대바다 셔람니 예세가 도나 대바다 셔람니 수도 와래
So here it says then in brief, or I summarize the causes for these two results, that is the high status and the highest good, as being faith and wisdom. That is, this faith or confident trust in karma and its results and so forth serves as the cause for giving rise. It's the primary cause, actually, for achieving the kind of desired result of happiness and so forth in the higher realms of existence. Whereas the wisdom that understands emptiness is the primary cause which gives rise to the achievement of the highest good. And so where the two, where they're summarized in this way, faith and wisdom, this shows that the results that arise from them are also specified in as coming from these two factors: faith giving rise to this positive kind of desirable experience in the higher realms, whereas the wisdom understanding emptiness gives rise specifically to liberation as the primary cause for the achievement of liberation.
Oh yeah, that here ne 가서래 대랑 온도니 대화대 하다 미주지 대화세대 갑자기 온도세대 아니 하다 미주지 대화 당념 세샤도와 다디 단다 온도당내래 이수 치 온도세대 아니 내래당 온도 또배진 비wan도钱나 내래내라 또네 온도 제도 또고래 어고선 내래 또네 저와 온도 세와대 간절지라 샤고래 sana 온도 된다 디 온도 생간데 가서래 온디 땡데 온디 체 온도 하다 매기 땡지 체바르데 아니 내송기 땡래 아니 체바도 파비 체바도 파바 차베 차지 와라 와어 된데기 된다와데 온도라 샤고로 마도 온디 대화세 온디 대화 좀 아니 가서래 룽라 때나 뽕먹게 온도데 룽라 때나 뽕고 와래 그봐 온도데 온디 캐바 데비 살라 소완 니 신도 거주 신도 거도 주와 인베 룽라 때나 바꿔서 이제 송하래 신도 거주레스 샤자들라냐 소요와래 통문주 중세 거주 시도 거주 전에 자제내서 야라다 하고로와 야
So here, how do we determine that this is actually the case? How do we develop faith that our actions give rise to a high status form of life? How do we develop that kind of confidence? Faith here is referring to a sort of confidence that it is the case that when we perform virtuous actions, we'll experience happiness and the other sorts of good or even neutral experience within a high life, such as being a human or a god. In order to really understand that, here we're presenting this in the way in which first we're presenting the development of or the methods by which one achieves high status, and then Master Nagarjuna presents the understanding of emptiness, selflessness, which produces the highest good. But to really establish this firmly through inference, one has to go through a kind of procedure of establishing how it is that we can establish that. Now, with respect to the relationship between karma and its results, that is, specifically, if we say, when I do a virtuous action, I'll experience happiness in some future life, that fact or reality is something that one can only actually establish through reliance upon the scriptural revelation of the Buddha. It's not something that we can know directly ourselves through perception, like the ordinary experience that we have of external objects, perception, or through inference, basic inference. Rather, it's something that requires a reliance upon authoritative statements of the Buddha. Now, in order to understand this, there's three categories of objects, of things that are knowable, objects of knowledge. The first of these are sort of obvious objects that we can perceive with our senses, vision and so forth. We see things, hear things and so forth. And then the other second category is things that that require inference. We have to infer the existence of these things, but we can be confident and ascertain with certainty that things exist by means of inference. And then the third category of things is what is called extremely obscure objects of knowledge, or highly hidden, difficult to perceive objects of knowledge. And to establish them correctly, one needs to rely upon and first establish authoritative statements of an authoritative person.
Oh yeah, 这张 샤제네 숨세가라 시도 고주 세대 시도 고주 세와디 좀 된대지 농을 때나 뽑아 마도 아니 뭐도 그리 발라때나 뽑미네 봐.
So here, now in the case of the subtle workings of karma and its karma and the results of karma, we can't establish this through obvious direct perception. We cannot establish it through ordinary kinds of inference. Rather, in order to establish that, to determine that is the case, we need to rely upon the statements of an authoritative person. In this case, the Lord Buddha has said that this is the case in his statements in the scriptures. So it's through reliance upon these scriptural statements that we're able to establish that karma, virtuous karma, gives rise to pleasure, happiness, and so forth in the higher realms of existence.
인자다 사람이 주지 아니 대화당 당령점 농라대나 뽑묘가 봐 인자 뽑묘도 봐 인자 다 된다 신도 고주 인시 속에 있지 말이 다 오늘 가르래서나 신도 고주에서는 진배 농지 틈지대 전에 진바 땅 왔다 때네 아니 남이 진바 땅이 제부대라 농지지 쳐봐 된듯이 용그래 추름성 왔다 때네 온디 유된 쳐봐지 되단 되려고지 토그래 양바디 어 된디 쳐봐디 아니 농라대나 뽑아 쳐봐 상원도 신도 고주 인생에 다 된듯이라
문도지
하고서
그래서 렌데기 치당 신두고교 요 말에
지당 신도 고주 말해서 지당 디배자 나라 샤바 나신시나 디송다데 텔레송고아라 마도 하다 미주지 온디 대화데 하다 미주 유주디위 대화당 소와 땅념 이라 저러와 당원도 신도 고주제 샤그 온도 되라 하다 미주지 대화데 농라대나 뽑묘거와 소와 땅념이야 농라대나 뽑묘거와 자 오늘 가를 삼미지 대화세에 가를 해서나 대화세에 되잖아 롱지 중앙라 진바 땅말라 되네 롱지 지켜봐 대위 쳐봐 대다고지 중앙래 수좀 중앙라 되네 된디 리된 거 쳐봐 대다고지 중앙래 냠도 또와대 된디 쳐봐대 아니다 신고인배 달라샤
So here, I in the translation, I didn't state this as specifically or clearly as I should have, so I need to correct something that I just said in the last little section. It is the case that one can infer through inference, that is the second form of valid knowledge or valid knowledge, you can infer in a general sense that if you perform virtuous actions, you will experience happiness in the higher realms of existence. This can be established through a process of reasoning, and likewise with respect to suffering arising from non-virtue. So these can be established through inference, but when we get into the specifics of particular forms of experience that are found in the upper realms, for example. That is that, so if we say through generosity, we'll have special forms of wealth and enjoyable conditions in life as a human or as a god, then that is something that requires reliance upon valid scripture in order to establish it. And likewise, when we say the maintenance of proper ethical conduct will give us happiness, the experience of happiness as a human and as God. Those specific relationships between specific types of virtue and non-virtue and their results, those require reliance upon scripture to establish them. But the general principle that happiness, and as it's said in this text here, happiness and the sort of neutral experiences that we have as humans and as gods, those arise from virtue in general. That can be established through inference.
Oh yeah, then it Jimbata wala tena lonje yi chaba dita bu chunga tang. Chudumson wala tena ane ngondo kansa luden chaba jewa chunga de ane jomden de ji lung kwana la tena pa lung o sunga de ane jomden de ji lung de la ane chaba sumji namba jesung chaba sumji taba rwa jimbala tena chudumson lonje chunga tang. ane chudumson wala tena denzo 중화 때기 진배 lonje 침지 대시위 롱데 아니 되게 계지 된다데 가래래 사나랑게 땡자 진발라 lonje 중화다 추주밀라 아니 가소래 대화 중화데 땜바기 롱데라 롱디 텐라 아니 통주 때발라 무슨 참면에 밤매봐 주사 고주 때발라 모두 제바게 내 밤매봐 시도 고주가 발라 라정시 가와서 내 밤매봐 都是过的。
神的国
神的国就得完了，
怎么了？
国就得完了，请我就搞我说去那方面吧。
So here then, how is it that we evaluate the statements of the Lord Buddha as being reliable in this third category of extremely obscure objects, things to be known, such that, for example, that out of generosity we'll have wealth in the future life as a human or as a god, or out of maintenance of preservation of ethical conduct, maintaining proper ethical conduct, will experience happiness. There, how do we know that the statements of the Buddha are valid, reliable? There, as a general rule, when you evaluate the reliability of a statement of the Buddha, you have to subject it to three criteria or three standards. The first being that that it doesn't contradict things that we know from our everyday experience, like through ordinary forms of knowledge that we have through our senses. The statement cannot contradict that. Then likewise, it can't be contradicted through valid forms of reasoning or through inference. And then finally, the third standard or criterion for establishing scripture as being, statements as being authoritative, reliable, is that they're not, there's, how would you say that? There's no, within they fit into the overall context of what the Buddha has taught. So a statement which it can't be something that would contradict and be not in congruence with the totality of what the Buddha has said. So if a statement, even if it's about something that is extremely obscure and difficult to know, if a statement conforms to those three standards of validity, then it's something that we can rely upon and use as for guidance.
Oh yeah, 단디 안에 가들에 사나 가서래 조여탄라 밀로치리 안에 현라 제수 봐봐래 세가라 다 코완주도 그人吧 조군주를 때네 저 동아 중하다 조군중 가베 안에 저 동아 가봐 가봐 인장 안에 되게 안에 코완도别人吧 군중 과제기 남대당 안에 군중라 조군중 가베 저 동아 차비 차자 내래 타봐 리다 뭐도 그리 발라 때네 툭툭 와래 롱을 때 먹어 봐. 어디 된다위 안에 좀 된데 된다라 안에 좀 된데 안에 가서 코완도 비를 받아 코완 주비를 받송아 대다 참아인 받대 빼라 대다 숨바기 룽라 잡아 숨제 타바 인장 좀 내내 대다 숨발라 밀루가 이봐 어 대배라 전에 아니 다 시도 고주 때문에 짐바 총알아 때네 론제 총알다 당와라 추루송알아 때네 아니 대화 총알 대양 롱그 턴라 참아 숨지 내봐 매봐 인장 아니 땜비 텐데 밀루가 이봐
So here, the way to determine that the teachings, the statements of the teacher, Lord Buddha here, are undeceptive and something that we can rely upon, have confidence and faith in. And with respect to these extremely obscure objects of knowledge, the specific relationships between specific actions, such as generosity giving rise to wealth, ethical conduct giving rise to happiness. These kinds of connections and such relationships are extremely obscure, but our Lord Buddha has taught them to us. So how is it that we're able to rely upon these statements? We can't see this. We don't have knowledge of this through our senses. We can't establish this through ordinary forms of inference based upon things that are commonly knowable for us. So how is it that we rely upon them? First, we have to establish that the Lord Buddha's statements about other topics are themselves valid and reliable. So here it comes down also to through inference, through our own experience, as well as relying upon inference, reasoning that we're able to employ ourselves, we can see that the Lord Buddha's statements about the suffering and its origin are actually the case. We can come to know that suffering arises from the sources of suffering. And likewise, we can understand that through the elimination of the causes of suffering, the origin of suffering, suffering itself ceases. And therefore, based upon that, we'll understand that the liberation from suffering, which is separation from the origin of suffering and suffering itself, that type of perfect liberation, the highest good, is something that we can establish through reasoning, and this form of reasoning is not special, like some special form of reasoning. Rather, it fundamentally comes down to the nature of things, the nature of reality. When we engage in reasoning based upon the nature of reality in this way, then we're able to establish that the Buddha is the authoritative master who teaches the suffering, the origin of suffering, cessation of suffering, and the path to the cessation of suffering, the path and its results. And since he's authoritative about these extremely important matters, these topics, therefore, when he makes statements about other kinds of things that we don't have direct access through our own reasoning and through our own experience, we can rely upon him, the Lord Buddha, as the authoritative teacher for these matters as well.
Oh yeah, that did do it. Tanga ma drawing that. That's sumba, you never toba. That would the Rinjit Waki, Anita, Georgia Tela, Tabata Sheram Ni Yebi Nane, Aneta Yiga, Aneta do or want to do Jedang, Nere do Jig, Juni Jinana, Tobaka Chaba Country, what is and up. Tachen Yiji Chalate, Sherab Danji Yandare. The needs over Sherab de, Ting on the Tapa Yin, say Gana, Oda, Tesungare. And the Korasana, Taba Nichil, say Gana, Taba de Ani Kasore, Gabdi Tendadi, Undi Ju, Ani Gajula, Gaju Jubala, Gavachula, Juba Deva, Taba de Sungare. Ra, what Tambo de 대반이 있어요. 어떤 미게 주범이 아니 계속 수준 낮은 거래스. 계속 수준 낮은 말할 때네 아니 돈이도 비누run도 주고요래스. 봐. 돈이도 비누run도 줘봐야다. 아니 돈이도 비 셔럽 제소나 아니 양답에 퇴리비 돈이도 비 셔럽에 손 땅서나 아니 시발로 코와데 조요 그래스. 세바 코와라 좋아 인장 대바다 셔럽 이진나네 아니 대바데 파와당 셔럽도 조어래 어떠니 돈이도 비 셔럽 그거라 내리 그거라 아니다 돈이도 비 셔럽 그거라 아니 대방원도 좋고래 다 잡아 코란 것도 다 돼. 와당에디 저번 말로요.
So here, this leads in this fifth verse of the root text here says that because one has faith, one partakes of the Dharma. We could also translate that as reveres the Dharma. And because one has wisdom, one understands, one truly understands, or one could say here, one understands things in accordance with reality. Of these two, wisdom is the foremost, but faith is the one that must come first. So this is discussing then the relationship between wisdom and faith, and how it is that in terms of the wisdom and faith, then we've already said that faith is the sort of primary cause for the faith, especially in the faith in incarnate's results, and faith which serves as the foundation for developing understanding of, which is based upon understanding the relationship between non-virtuous, especially the 10 non-virtuous kinds of actions and their results. And then with that kind of confidence and faith in that, one develops the discipline, the ethical discipline of avoiding the 10 non-virtuous kinds of behaviors, actions. So when you have faith, then that is designed to, that kind of faith and observance of that kind of ethical discipline, then faith serves as the cause for that ethical discipline. Ethical discipline, in turn, serves as the cause for achieving a rebirth with high status. Now here, high status is understood is sort of in general as achieving a life in which one is a god or a human being with good sort of conditions of life. But this is, in this text here, it's indicating that one should really be doing this with the wish to eventually achieve liberation. And therefore, one's developing this kind of life of high status as a foundation for the development of the wisdom that understands reality. Once you have that kind of wisdom that understands reality, then you'll be able to progress towards the achievement of the highest good that, as we've said, has been defined above as liberation from suffering and the origins of suffering. So here it's talking about the relationship between them, and that now it says that wisdom is the primary. Wisdom is primary in that it is the sort of direct instrument, agent, which enables one to achieve the highest good of liberation. But faith is a prerequisite for that. It's sort of faith is kind of secondary, you could say, to wisdom, insofar as wisdom is the direct agent that produces the highest good. But faith is the prerequisite for the achievement of wisdom, because without faith in karma and its results and the achievement of a high status kind of life, there's no way that one can develop the wisdom that affects one's liberation from samsara, the highest good.
Oh yeah, 대방원도 마다르제바데 까지 탐제지 응원도 안에 대방원도 조거와 인장 대방원도 마다르제바데 대방원도 상와라 되네 대바유나 아니 가지고 연대 탐제 폐와 제반나 연대 탐제 순신 폐와 제 서 아니 수만나 신체네 아니 대비 자와 rab단제 제순바다 대바 추구 제 자와 인바 다 대바 가지고 제 자와 인바 그봐 나 단단 니기 가지고 제 자와 인바 인장 대 대바데 단다디 온 다시 쉬와 나신신 온디 주 온도 한미 관방기 주치 안에每个 지방고 추dim되라 그와 주주발라 땜바 체바체 어 테라장고 그래서 다 다시 쉬와나지 대라의 每个 지방고 추주야 추좀 아니 연아 아니 돈이 사모 도롱기 아니 가 셰르다 땜바레 레이지비 셰르다 땜바 연예집이 셔라도 남자기 안에 셔라도 담바 인상 안에 돈이 도론 지그래서 셔라도 담바 내루지 태양다와 대라 때네 안에 사모도 많이라서 땜비 소라라 퇴화체 삼중기 셔라치 아니 퇴화라 때네 삼중기 셔라 깨니 안에 내루지 퇴르바 지그래서 된다비 다 미그지봉 그 추좀 당 아니 내로지 대리비 셔럼 이게 나네 조 가르래서나 되니지 조어데 돈이도 비셔럽들이 내리 대리비 대인바 가르래서나 대라 때네 아니 탑지 차당 대표권에 아니 스바랑 우수 좋아 제바 이장 아니 셔럼 온도래 셔럽데 조어들이 대인내가 아니 타바 온도 조고래 렌젤의 20이 대밤 렌젤의 20이 대밤에는 미국 주봉 모습이 있어요 말에 어디자 대승과 말에 이 대밤 이데 병원도 마서 와 셔러지 요문 점유바 미스비셔 Yeah.
So here then the commentary on this explains the relationship between faith and wisdom, and it says that it cites some passages of scripture where it says that faith is the prerequisite. It generates things like a mother. And here, that's referring to that faith is, or here, faith it refers specifically to a kind of confidence and understanding of the causality that obtains between happiness and virtue, and understands likewise that specifically the results between the causal relationship between non-virtuous actions and suffering. So when you have to have that understanding of that relationship, confidence in it, in order to, as a foundation for developing the ethical conduct, obtaining and then preserving the ethical conduct which gets rid of the 10 non-virtuous kinds of actions. So that kind of faith is fundamental, because without it, none of the other kinds of goods that one wishes, rebirth in high status or the highest good of liberation or of Buddhahood, can't arise. So the text here says that faith functions like that. Likewise, it says that another text says, another passage says that one should make the root of faith extremely firm. Here, referring again that the entirety of the Dharma is grounded in this kind of confidence or faith, and that one has to. Because someone who practices the Dharma is someone who has that kind of faith, or the Dharma, and the Dharma itself is predicated on confidence in the relationship between virtuous actions and happy, positive results. So here, the faith itself also functions to make one a suitable foundation for developing the positive practices, which are the 10 virtuous dharmas here, is a name given to the ethical conduct which abandons the 10 non-virtuous kinds of actions. And these then function as the cause for high rebirth. The 10 virtues serve as a cause for a high status. They make one like that. And then that sort of high status itself is the platform or basis upon which one can come to possess the wisdom that understands the profound emptiness. Without that kind of foundation of a high status life, there's no way to develop the understanding of emptiness. And therefore, it serves as that. Then the understanding of emptiness is that which causes one to understand the reality as it actually is. And among those two, then, faith and that kind of wisdom, if you ask which of them is chief or is chief, then you would say that the chief among those two is the wisdom that understands emptiness, because that wisdom that properly understands emptiness is that which actually liberates us from existence, from samsara. However, for that to arise, for that wisdom to arise, it's necessary to have the kind of confidence, faith, which is confidence in the relationship between actions and their results. And without having that as a prerequisite, as a prerequisite, that kind of confident faith in the causality of karma and its results, there's no way that it's completely impossible for wisdom to destroy the mental afflictions and to achieve any kind of liberation at all.
Oh yeah, that is it. And this is to Georgia. One of them, and the church in the room, Tabajan, the Kashi, Sherajan, the Kashi, say Gana, and I know where I'm body. I know where someone tell I didn't carry a sana, that no Jitani, Kazan Shijavan and so on, nothing. Sooner London turning, but Yambo Naji Shava chair, say Kazan Shua Nashi chair, tell you never to go a chair. That and then Dilla Shabadella and the draw sheet and Travas. Do not shed on Jibata, Momba Kashi Chemeta. Tini Taba Jasha, never leave it, any natural yin, say, any Dumbe drawer, Shedan drawer, Jibet drawer, Momba drawer, say, all team body. That dema, she did Zamba, Yanati.
So here then, this leads into the next topic, which is the characteristics of a disciple who is a suitable vessel for this kind of instruction. And here it lists, we discussed, we touched on this briefly yesterday when we referred to the verse in the 400 of Master Aryadeva, where it used the definition of the disciple who's a suitable vessel for this kind of Dharma instruction as being someone who is unbiased, who has sufficient intelligence to understand the teaching, or specifically to understand right from wrong, and then likewise has to have enthusiasm and a wish to engage in the study and practice of the teaching. Here, some different characteristics are enumerated, and these are given in verse 6. It says in the translation here, one who does not discount the Dharma through desire, anger, fear, or confusion should be known as one with faith, a supreme vessel of the highest good. So it's referring to the disciple who is the best kind of disciple or vessel, recipient for this instruction on the highest good. So it says that someone who doesn't Here it says in the translation, discount the Dharma, but one could also translate this as transgress the Dharma, as basically the same meaning, out of desire, anger, fear, or confusion.
Oh, yeah. That Dumbe Dova said the country cigarettes and Dumbe Chiller, there soon to garnish, and a shala chabe, soldier bala sawala juicing. Or Shala Chapi Wangi, and a soldier bala sawa juicing. Ani or soldier boagi, and a case or chen dorwa. Right, chen dorwani, chabadang, Dimbechela dawa.
So here, then, the first of these, where it says desire or craving, like that, here an example that is given, someone who transgresses the Dharma or goes beyond what is proper within Dharma. It says that out of attachment to meat, someone who engages in killing, taking life, and so forth, like killing animals or whatever to eat the meat of them, and someone who gives engaging in killing, and by killing, then one transgresses the precept to abandon killing, and one goes beyond the Dharma, transgresses the Dharma. And then, so this is an example then of transgressing the Dharma out of desire and attachment.
Then, Kasar Kunan Narsimbi Soji, Segala, and it Rala Neba Cheso, Rala Neba Chedo, and it Rala Neba Cheba Juro, Rasovaki, and it Kunan Narsimbaki, and it Semtetaki, and it Shen Soja Batao, and it Shatang Chelatawa.
So here's then someone who transgresses the Dharma out of anger is an example for that would be someone who out of intense kind of animosity towards another person or is thinking, for example, if you think this person hurt me in the past, they're hurting me now, they're going to hurt me in the future. And with that kind of idea, then one has intense hatred or animosity towards them. And then with that sort of mentality, if you take their life, that's an example of transgressing the Dharma out of hatred.
Oh, 아니 겨우 차바라 소와기 집에 아니 최다 콘데샤바기 미거지 본거 추좀 돌아와. 그러봐 집에 쳐라다봐.
Then an example of transgressing the Dharma out of fear would be the case of someone who gives up the Dharma out of and engages in killing and other kinds of non-virtuous action out of fear of a punishment from a ruler and so forth. This is one example of how one out of fear might abandon the Dharma. In this case, engaging killing because you're afraid of what the king or ruler will do to you if you don't.
어디니 추지 최진 쳐봐다. 아니 파마라 소비 치도 아니 소져봐라 예매도 손에 아니 양 소져본이 주준도 와대 아니 몸배 아니 몸발에 몸배 쳐라다와.
라 추라
추지
So then an example of doing this out of stupidity or confusion, transgressing the Dharma out of that, out of confusion or stupidity, would be abandoning the Dharma by thinking that doing things like animal sacrifice for the sake of one's parents, and so forth, killing animals out of, or performing some kind of blood sacrifice for the sake of one's parents, thinking that it's without any kind of, that kind of killing is not faulty, would be a case of transgressing the Dharma out of stupidity or confusion.
Oh yeah, 대단 좋아 시고네 아니 셔란 다와라 도네 아니 두샤 강시 아니 dum바다 세단다 지바다 온비 쳇라 민다와 민다신 아니 콘도 샤바게 랭에와라 소와기 아니 랭레라 이체와 되니 대바지안되니 따디 최디 아니 온도당에래 리제티와 그녀 중화지래 숨는 말에
So then here it concludes by saying that so a person who does not transgress the Dharma out of desire, hatred, fear, or ignorance, or out of confusion and stupidity, as enumerated above. And these are just examples. And then likewise has trust in cause and the causality of karma, that karma gives rise to its results in the ways that we've presented previously, and that karma has definite types of results and so forth. Such a person who has that kind of confidence in this is here called a person with faith. And that type of person that has that kind of faith is defined as the suitable vessel for this kind of instruction that's found here in the precious Garland.
Oh yeah, that 되게 영어소화대 영어서 다들 subject空了 강시另外一些来탐제 레바 용다데 나다시안라 펜시나 다도체 안체바 테케바 주 강시 아니 랑게另外一som지 아니 고som지 아니 고som지 아니 탐제 아니 가서래 그 미게 칸라 주 마주 그와다 미게 와다 로마된지 셈 칸라 주 마주 바 딱바 체네 아 아니 미게 와당 루도 마덴 발라 주 바테 파 빠네 아니 개와 주발라 아니 가서래 개와 체바다 개와 체바 대양 아니 랑게 된자 마인바 아니 체도 체바 섬제 탐자나는 바양다바 저거 창주 토비 체도 아니 가서래 개와 체바다 체비 개와 대양 아니 섬제의 텐도 와 체게 예수 어이 체바데 다도 체바데 개바래
So then the next verse explains that such a person is, because they're suitable for being guided to liberation, they're the best kind of vessel for the instruction on the highest good. And this is explained likewise in explained in the 7th verse, where it says, a wise person is one who, having accurately analyzed all actions of body, speech, and mind, always acts for the benefit of self and others. And the commentary here explains that this is referring to the type of person who, in terms of their own physical, verbal, and mental actions, they carefully examine and carefully scrutinize what all of the actions that they engage in, physically, verbally, mentally, as to whether or not they're virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral. And then when they've done that kind of examination, they make effort to abandon all of the non-virtuous and neutral kinds of actions and strive to engage in virtue. And likewise, they do that with the overall intention of dedicating that kind of activity that they're engaging in for the unexcelled highest awakening, for the sake of other beings. So they practice this kind of teaching for the sake of all sentient beings. And this is done in order to benefit both themselves and others as well. And having understood that this is the case, they do whatever, they constantly act properly with respect to the things which are to be observed or taken up, as well as the things which are to be gotten rid of or avoided. So they are constantly engaging in this examination of themselves as to whether or not they're engaging in virtue and non-virtue, and then they constantly strive to avoid non-virtue and practice virtue, and doing so, dedicating it towards the benefit of all sentient beings.
Oh yeah, that had the shoe and nothing or Gosum Miguel or the Loma Denji on the draw the Pangane. Anikawa Gosmarang Gawala Juba, Tang, Anelanam by Anda was always Chanju to Tobichitu, Anin Drubata. Drubi Gawa Tang, Ane Lanam by Anda was always Chanjuti, Durum, Ane Samjanji, Ten Drubate. 아니 다다 현라 랑라야 편바 현라야 편바 임바 어디 시네 아니 뒤진도 랑도出신도 아니 다도 제바에 대 어디 개와 셔럽전 시차와 니네 와 개와 셔럽전 시차이스 랑도 로바 슈바니 에 가서 랑도 로바 슈바지 로바 슈바지나 아니 개와 내가 르바지 이나양 아니 갑자기 개와 세지 미게 갑자기 개와 심해잖아.
So here then, so such the ideal vessel for this kind of instruction that's found in the precious Garland is a person who, again, constantly observes their actions, body, speech, and mind, physical, mental, and verbal actions, and carefully examines them to see whether they're virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral. And then they strive always to avoid any kind of non-virtuous actions and even neutral forms of action so as to make all of their action virtuous. And they're doing this with the overriding intention of benefiting both themselves and others. And so when they're performing the actions, actually involved in the actions, then they do them with the wish to achieve the unexcelled highest awakening of Buddhahood, and for the sake of all sentient beings, themselves and others. And then they likewise, when they've accomplished the actions, performed an action and completed it, then they dedicate the virtue, the merit that's been produced through that action towards their achievement of unexcelled highest awakening for the sake of all living beings. And so a person who acts like that is someone who understands the proper way to benefit themselves and others. And a person who does that in that way, having understood the entire situation that way, and constantly practices properly that which is to be karma actions that are to be engaged in, and actions that are and avoids actions that they shouldn't engage in, then that person is called here an intelligent, wise person. In the root verse, it's called a wise person, meaning someone who possesses intelligence is quite wise. However, someone who engages in action, whose behavior is the opposite of that, who does faulty kinds of non-virtuous behavior and doesn't engage in a virtuous kind of behavior in their actions, even if they're a master of all kinds of scientific subjects. There are 5 traditional sciences. Even if they've mastered all of those and know them very well, here, in this context, such a person would not be called intelligent or wise or a scholar or anything like that. They wouldn't have, they wouldn't be given that kind of, they wouldn't be called learned or wise here.
Oh yeah, that turn do na. Ani di jejang ondo tembala tene. Ani kibu chungudan tumoyana la lo jangwata. Ngele tapa tembala te, ngele tembala tarpa tembala te, ngele an tapa tembala tene jindan timomi lam tapa tenye gilodang. Ani tamje chembaki, ani drabaki diwu chimbe lam. Ani katona 가서래 기우스미지 남지 림바 레바르 시에네 안에 수신도 냠수 렘바데네 안에 타바자다 셰랍젠 왔다던데 디두자던데 송거에 버려.
So in brief here, then, the disciple that is the proper vessel for the instruction here is one who, having properly understood the stages of the path that are contained within the activities of the three types of persons, the person of lesser, intermediate, and greater scope. Then once one understands those methods, and here it's again referring to these practices of the person of lesser scope, one is performing them, they're in common with the person of lesser scope, but one's actually performing them with this higher aspiration of becoming a Buddha. So you do them, understand how they work, and engage in them. If you properly practice them in the way that they're laid out in the instruction of the stages of the path, then that person is called someone who has faith and has wisdom in this context here, and is the suitable vessel for this instruction on the precious garland.
Oh yeah. 다 되게 두자대 시에네. 당원도 준대 소소 샤바 대라. 아니 가서 그래. 준대 소소 샤바 대라. 대월 샤바 다다 좀 자자 망보 예배 나네. 당원도 최 샤바 세대. 원도 최 샤바 세라. 원도 최 샤바잖아. 원도 최 주로 샤바. 어치 다디니 제주로 샤바다 들라sab자 마보 마용도 우리 제주로 샤바인 바래
주루샤오.
원도 제주로 샤바.
So then here this leads into the next topic, which is the explanation of the specifics of the causality, cause and effect relationship that gives rise to high status and the highest good. It has multiple subdivisions here. There's starting off with the explanation of the causality that gives rise to high status, and then it goes on with multiple subdivisions in the commentary here. Here it begins with the explanation of the dharmas. Dharma in this context refers to practices for high status. And then it gets into the enumeration of the particular dharmas, practices of high status. And the beginning of this is explaining an explanation of 16 practices or dharmas, 16 practices for high status.
Oh yeah, churchuru 간데스레 sana 아니 Garland 도바 그 체죽섬당 주비 체죽섬 자 다 Garland 도비 체죽섬보다 간데레 sana 미그와 줄라 도바다 카나마 도바 시안나 도바 이제 공연이나 다 담보 미그와 줄라 도바도 마용하체.
So then here, in terms of the practices that pertain to high status, there's 16 of them that are enumerated, and they're divided into different categories. There's 13 practices that should be turned away from, that should be avoided. And then there are 3 practices that should be engaged in. And then, so these are enumerated as first within the 13 things that should be practices that should be avoided. There's the 10 non-virtues that one should turn away from, should abandon. And then there's other forms of misconduct that one should also turn away from, avoid.
미개와 줄란 도비 아니 그시 추즘데 온디 쳐라샤고랜당 아니 미개와 줄란 도바샤 발라 강 도주 그 미개와 줄이 샤고 이와인자 다시 마셔고 말해.
So here, then there's, as far as the achievement of high status, as we've mentioned, arises from the practice of virtue. And the practice of virtue begins with the turning away from non-virtue. So in order to understand and to avoid non-virtue, the avoidance of non-virtue is itself virtue. So first one has to understand what non-virtue is.
Oh yeah, that me go to go na ne, ane so je ba, de ba so je te. Mi se ba da ku bon tang se ga, ane mi se ba bon a da, ma chi ba le ba ko a. Da mi se ba la ring na la, ane si san ba jo wa ta du se ma re re sin yo wa xia chen yo wa yin zang, ngai si san ba jo wa ta du si mo ga che. Do 我没是我就需要这些人呐，说这把你三星都马诺瓦你现在把我这个早晚拿来，俺你看的是我的说这是个的看的人噻呐，说这把你俺你马诺瓦你现在把我是让来先就他在被看上，说天下三星都，说这把你三星都马诺瓦你现在把。现在被拍到被双嘎巴提在那，俺你说这个来了，我们这原来现在给嘛都晓得，俺你拍到被双嘎呢，俺你说这个来了做完没的，说这个来就咱们做完。
So here, the first of these non-virtues, which one is to turn away from, is killing. Here, killing can refer to killing human beings or animals, any living being that is other than oneself. Here, it's referred to, and here it refers to. There are various gradations of it, various objects, various methods by which one can kill. But in general, the basic action of killing, it's called the path of this karma, of this action, refers to observing another person, another living being, and forming the intention to take their life, to make their life cease, and then properly identifying them as who they are is part of it, this process, in order to have a fully qualified action of killing. And then engaging in the action itself, performing whatever it is you do to cause their life to stop. And then the completion of the action is if the person actually ceases to live, and then that understanding of that, recognition of that, and understanding that one has performed that action. If you have all of these various factors in place, then one has performed a fully qualified action of taking another's life.
没事，把当在，古邦当是干了，俺那马金连把人把的，俺这个告诉马金连把现金罗拿着，土当这笔打给钱，是干了，马金连把俺那让来挪他的笔，俺那在人当长完，俺那让来土当这笔当，天天给俺那马金把拉呢，俺那头了结完提在那，俺那马金连给来人做人把的。马金连把让来挪他的笔先，刚才是，挪他的笔先以在人当长完，俺那叫我土当，俺那这笔连把来带呢，俺那让他投了结算了，俺那马金连把连人做完钱。
So then, the second one is theft. Or stealing another person's property. Here, likewise, in the Abhidharma Kosha, the treasury of Abhidharma, explains how it is that an action of stealing or theft is completed. Here, it's the technical term, the path of action is completed when one forms the intention to take someone else's property. Can be any kind of property that belongs to another, and you understand that this is someone else's property. You form the intention to take it. You engage in some effort. You make some effort to take it, you achieve that end of taking the other person's property, and you understand that you've done that. When you've accomplished all of those actions or those components of the overall action of stealing, theft, then you have a full path of the action of stealing.
어디라 대화라 소자 미세바당 세게 아니 가소래 소자 미세바 아니 현지대 현지 순위在国帮啊是谈的提前是吧那你现在出门帮啊当是的我呢证明这把一老板也把这家没人把俺那看上相当啦说完了俺呢我得求怎么的俺那老板也把是吧得送我的
So then the third non-virtue which is to be avoided is adultery. And this refers to taking someone else's spouse for sexual relations, and then also inappropriate kinds of sexual relations with others, even if it's not someone else's spouse, which it also includes different kinds of intercourse that are prohibited. And so this would be again, all of the components of the overall action where you you have an understanding of the situation, you form the intention to engage in inappropriate sexual intercourse, and then you do so, do the action, you understand that you've completed it with someone else's spouse or in an inappropriate fashion, then that would be a complete path of that karma, path of action of what's designated here as adultery, but including also inappropriate forms of sexual intercourse.
아니 류지래는 남바숨 세가라 류지 미게와라 도바이 도바심 소제바 봉아 로바예바 봉아 마심발레바 봉아 숨보데 아니 류지 미게와라 도바기 아니 류지 아니 가서 그시 그와 죽은 안에 주름래
So then these three here refer to physical actions, actions that you perform with your body, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, or adultery. And so in all cases, there's the non-virtuous action, which is, as we've enumerated, but if you deliberately abstain from, turn away from these kinds of actions, deliberately do that, then that deliberate abstention from non-virtue is itself virtuous. It constitutes the first three virtuous actions, which is the abandonment or abstention from engaging in these three physical non-virtuous actions. We'll stop there for today.